They called us cowards in front of everyone. Not quietly, not in whispers passed through diplomatic back channels. Ambassador Kreth Var of the Kreth Dominion stood up in the Great Hall of the Galactic Concord, in front of representatives from 40 spacefaring civilizations, and said it loud enough for every translation device in the room to carry it perfectly. Humans send diplomats to battles and lawyers to wars. Perhaps they should garrison the nursery ships instead. The laughter that followed was not the polite, uncomfortable kind. It was real. It rolled through the chamber like a wave, species after species finding genuine amusement in the joke. The Voss delegation clicked their secondary jaw plates together, which I had learned was their equivalent of a chuckle. The Thun hive cluster pulsed a warm amber color. Even the usually stone-faced Rethian observers allowed themselves a slow blink of amusement. I sat at the human table, all three of us, and I smiled. My aide, Lieutenant Senna, leaned close. "You're not going to say anything?" "No," I said. "He just called our entire species cowards in front of 40 civilizations." "I know. And you're smiling." "Yes." She stared at me like I had lost my mind. Maybe I had. Or maybe I understood something that she would come to understand later. The same way all humans eventually do. The worst thing we could do in that moment was explain ourselves. Because the moment you explain yourself to someone who has already decided what you are, you only confirm that their opinion matters to you. And Kreth Var's opinion did not matter to me. Not yet. What mattered was Threshold Station, and the assignment that nobody else wanted. The Concord needed a garrison force for an outpost near a region called the Hollow. It was a dead zone, a stretch of deep space where signals deteriorated and ships that ventured too far in stopped sending transmissions. Not destroyed, as far as anyone could tell, just gone, silent. 12 vessels over 40 years, from 6 different species. No wreckage ever recovered. Every species with a military presence in the Concord had quietly declined the posting. The Kreth said it was beneath their warrior caste. The Voss said their biology made long-term isolation postings impractical. The Thun could not operate effectively without hive-range proximity to their cluster. Humanity volunteered. The laughter in the chamber was even louder the second time. Kreth Var, still standing, spread all 6 of his arms in a gesture I recognized as theatrical disbelief. A convenient posting for a species that wishes to avoid combat assignments. Perhaps the Hollow will keep them busy counting stars. I requested the floor. The session moderator, a tall Rethian named Coordinator Alal, gestured for me to speak. "We accept," I said simply. "We will take the threshold posting. We ask for standard resupply intervals and communication relay access, nothing more." Then I sat back down. We moved into Threshold Station 2 months later. The equipment manifest raised some eyebrows among the Concord's logistics coordinators. Not because it was excessive, but because it was strange. Where other species sent weapons platforms and shielding arrays, we sent fiber optic cable by the mile, acoustic dampening panels, non-reflective hull coating, sensor arrays that pointed inward, into the Hollow, instead of outward toward known space, and one heavily encrypted data archive, listed on the manifest simply as Black Ledger. Nobody asked about it. I think they assumed it was human eccentricity. Threshold Station was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Not the quiet of empty space, which I had grown used to over 15 years of service. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that made the back of your neck feel warm for no reason. The kind that made you want to check the corner of a room you had already checked. My crew of 22 settled into routines quickly, the way humans do when they feel something watching them. Routine is how we cope. Routine is how we convince ourselves that the shape in the dark is just a shadow. 3 months passed. Then something came out of the Hollow. I was in the observation bay when the proximity alert sounded. Not an alarm, because I had recalibrated the system to produce a soft tone rather than a blare. Blaring alarms make people move fast and think slow. I needed my crew thinking. The vessel on our screens was black, not dark gray, not unlit, but genuinely, completely black in a way that seemed to absorb the light around it, rather than simply failing to reflect it. It had no running lights, no transponder signal, no heat signature that our sensors could resolve into anything recognizable. It moved in a way that I could only describe, in my official log, as intentional concealment, as if it was not a ship that lacked the ability to be seen, but a ship that was actively choosing not to be. The Concorde's nearest fleet was already moving to intercept. 16 Kreth warships, the pride of the Dominion's 4th battle fleet, emerged from transit at the edge of the Hollow's boundary. I watched their formations on the shared tactical display. They were good, disciplined. Kreth Var had not been lying about his people's military reputation. The black ship did not fire. It did not hail. It turned one side of its hull toward the Kreth fleet, and a pulse of light moved across it, slow and even, like a searchlight sweeping a field. The Kreth fleet stopped. Every ship, all 16, systems offline, weapons silent, not a single distress beacon, because distress beacons require power, and nothing on those ships had any. But the crews were alive. We could see them on the Concorde's remote biomonitors, 16 ships full of 6-limbed apex predators, every single one of them completely motionless, frozen where they stood, not unconscious, aware, just utterly, completely unable to move. The black ship turned and began moving toward Threshold Station. The Concorde emergency channel became very loud, very quickly. I heard voices I had never heard anything from before, species that communicated exclusively through diplomatic formality, suddenly shouting in raw, undisguised panic. And then, cutting through all of it, a voice I recognized. Kreth Var, broadcasting from somewhere in the rear lines, far from his frozen fleet. His voice was different. The performance was completely gone. What was left was just a person, stripped of rank and posture, speaking in a way I suspected very few people had ever heard from him. Human. Commander Dran. Leave. Evacuate your station. You cannot fight this. Nothing can fight this. Go. I looked at my crew. 22 faces looking back at me. Not one of them was running. Senna had her hand on a console, waiting. Chief Engineer Mwamba was already moving toward the lower decks without being told, because he knew what came next. The others were at their stations, still, ready. I closed the emergency channel. Begin protocol nightfall, I said. Let's go to work. The black ship reached Threshold Station and did the same thing it had done to the Kreth fleet. That slow, sweeping pulse of light moved across our hull. I felt it somehow, not physically, but in the way you feel the pressure of a gaze from across a dark room. A presence, enormous and old, and completely certain of its own power, turning its full attention onto us. We kept working. The pulse hit nothing it expected to hit. Our non-reflective coating disrupted its scan frequencies. The acoustic dampeners neutralized the secondary wavelength that, as we had theorized from the data our scouts had sent back, was the component that interacted with neurological fear responses. The fiber optic systems rerouted our internal communications through physical lines that no electromagnetic disruption could touch. I heard Senna exhale beside me, not in fear, in the way you exhale when something you have practiced 100 times finally happens in reality, and your body recognizes that it already knows what to do. I want to explain something, because I think it is the part that the Concorde never understood, the part that no amount of diplomatic communication had ever managed to translate correctly. They watched humanity negotiate conflicts and thought we were afraid of war. They watched us de-escalate instead of engage, and decided we must lack the capacity for violence. They looked at our history, at our transition from a fractured, warring civilization to a species that prioritized cooperation, and they read it as weakness, as the behavior of prey animals that had learned to be polite. They were wrong about almost everything. Humanity did not avoid war because we feared it. We avoided unnecessary war because we understood something that species with shorter histories and simpler fears had not yet learned. The most dangerous thing in any conflict is never the enemy standing in front of you. It is the one you do not know exists yet. We had been watching the Hollow for 30 years. Quietly, carefully. We had sent scouts in, one by one, vessels with minimal crew and maximum sensor capacity, and none of them had come back. But they had transmitted. Right up until the moment they went silent, they had been sending data back, and we had been collecting every fragment. We built a complete picture, scan frequencies, weapon harmonics, hull behavior, movement patterns. The thing in the black ship had been testing the Concorde for decades, and we had been building a file on it while everyone else pretended the Hollow was a navigational inconvenience. The Black Ledger was that file, 30 years of data from ships that did not survive the collection of it. Every crew member who had gone into the hollow knew they likely would not come back, and they went anyway, because someone had to, and humans have always been the species that walks into the dark, because leaving the dark unexplored is more dangerous than fearing it. The black ship interfaced with our station systems. It was looking through our databases, searching for something, perhaps for the same blankness and ignorance it had found in every other species it had encountered. Instead, it found the Black Ledger. And buried at the very end of it, past all the data and analysis and tactical assessments, was a message, written in a signal format we had derived from its own transmissions. It had taken our linguists 11 years to construct it. It said, "We know what you are, we know what you want. We know you are not alone. Neither are we. Let's talk." The black ship went completely still. For 6 hours, nothing in the surrounding area of space moved. The frozen Kreth fleet hung silent in the dark. The Concorde ships at the edge of the boundary held their positions. Nobody on the emergency channel spoke. I think the entire Concorde was holding its breath. Then the black ship responded, in the same signal format. 3 words that our system translated almost instantly, because we had spent 11 years learning exactly this language. "You were ready." I leaned toward the communication console. "We have been ready," I said. "We were waiting for you to arrive." What followed was not a battle. It was not even tense. Not for us, though I suspect it was profoundly strange for everyone watching from the Concorde's observation vessels. The entity in the black ship, which we came to call the Veil, communicated with increasing clarity over the next several hours. Our translation systems, built specifically for this moment, kept pace. The Veil were not conquerors. They were something much older and considerably more complicated. They had been moving through the galaxy for longer than most Concorde species had been spacefaring, and they had been doing what we had been doing, watching, testing, and looking for something specific. They had encountered the Kreth and the Voss and the Thun and 30 other species, and in every case, the response had been the same: attack or flee, aggression or panic. The Voss had destroyed their own ships rather than allow boarding. The Thun hive mind had fragmented under the psychic pressure of the Veil's presence. Individual members suddenly cut off from the collective, overwhelmed by a silence they had never experienced. The Kreth had fired everything they had and achieved nothing except confirming that their weapons were ineffective. Humans had done neither. The Veil had been scouts, looking for a species capable of meeting the unknown without dissolving into instinct. Because what they were scouting for was something else, something that actually was coming, moving through the deep dark beyond the galactic arm, genuinely hostile in the way that the Veil never had been. They needed a species to help them build a warning, a coalition, a defense. They chose us. The Concorde emergency channel, which had been completely silent during those 6 hours, came back to life slowly. Species checking in, asking what they had witnessed, trying to process the fact that the thing which had paralyzed 16 Kreth warships without firing a weapon was now holding a calm conversation with the 3 humans on Threshold Station. Kreth Var came on the channel last. There was a long pause before he spoke, the kind of pause that I recognized as a person choosing their words very carefully for the first time in a while. "Commander Dran." Another pause. "What are you people?" I let the silence sit for a moment. Outside the observation window, the black ship floated motionless, enormous and patient, waiting for us to finish our internal communications before we returned to the conversation it considered far more important. "We are the species that checks under the bed," I said, "and then climbs in anyway." I turned back to the Veil's communication channel. Senna was already at the translation console, and Wamba had brought coffee up from the lower deck, setting a cup beside my station without a word. 22 humans on a deep space outpost, sitting across a communications link from one of the oldest and most powerful entities any of us had ever encountered, completely calm. Not because we were fearless, because we had been afraid of things like this since the very first night a human being sat beside a fire and told another human being a story about what lived in the dark. We did not fear the dark. We had been studying it for 200,000 years.